My mother told me I was being dramatic. She said it the same way she always did, light, dismissive, like my entire life was a minor inconvenience she had learned to tolerate. I had just asked her and my father to check in on my apartment once a day for 5 days while I flew to Seattle for the biggest conference of my career. Feed my cat, collect my mail, water the 2 plants by the window. That was it. 5 days, 2 plants, 1 cat. She laughed. Not a warm laugh. A short, sharp little sound that landed like a slap. Sweetheart, we didn't drive an hour to become your house staff. I was standing in my kitchen, still in my work clothes, holding my phone so tightly I could feel the edges pressing into my palm. My mother had just used the word staff to describe checking on a cat. She said this from the living room of an apartment I had been paying for, in full, for 3 years. That was the moment everything shifted. Not broke, shifted. Into something colder and more precise than anything I had felt before. I said, "You're right, I'll figure something out." I hung up before she could answer. Then I opened my laptop, and I started making a list. To understand why that single word undid 11 years of patience, you have to understand what those 11 years actually looked like. I am 31 years old. I am a senior financial analyst at a consulting firm. I did not get there by accident, and I did not get there with help. I got there because I chose, every single time there was a choice, to work instead of rest, to save instead of spend, to plan instead of hope. My parents are not cruel people. I want to be clear about that, because what I did later might make them sound like villains, and they are not. They are simply the kind of people who, when they found a load-bearing wall, kept stacking things on it without ever wondering what it cost the wall to stay standing. My father worked in logistics for most of his career and retired early because his back gave out when I was 23. My mother had worked part-time on and off and stopped entirely when he did. They had some savings, a modest pension, and a mountain of decisions made over the years that were quietly bankrupting them. A timeshare they never used but kept renewing. A second car that sat in the lot more than it moved. Credit cards carried from month to month with just enough payment to keep the interest growing. When I was 25, they told me they were going to lose their home. Not the house I grew up in, they had already sold that when I went to college. This was the condo they had bought afterward, the one they always called their fresh start. The adjustable mortgage had adjusted into something they could no longer pretend to manage. My father sat across from me at a diner and handed me a folder of bank statements with the expression of a man turning himself in to authorities. I did not yell. I did not cry. I had been doing neither of those things for most of my life because in my family, emotional reactions were my brother's department. My brother is 28. His name is not important. What is important is that he has always been, in the language my mother uses when she thinks I am not listening, the sensitive one. He dropped out of college after 1 semester because the classes were uninspiring. He started 3 businesses, each of which my parents described as finding himself, and each of which dissolved within a year. He once borrowed my car for a weekend trip and returned it with a cracked bumper and no explanation. My mother called me to suggest I let it go because he was going through something. He is always going through something. When my parents handed me those bank statements at the diner, I spent 3 weeks rebuilding their finances from scratch. I restructured their debt. I used the bonus I had been saving for my own down payment to bring their mortgage current. And then, because I had learned by then that a temporary fix is just a delayed disaster, I took it a step further. I moved them out of the condo before the market turned and found them a 2-bedroom apartment in a building 40 minutes from mine, in a good neighborhood with a grocery store on the corner. I signed the lease. I set up autopay from an account I funded monthly. I arranged for their utilities, their renter's insurance, their internet. I told them to keep their pension for groceries and personal spending. Everything structural, I would handle. They called me their miracle. My mother cried on the phone and told me I was the most responsible, remarkable person she had ever raised. My father said he would pay me back every cent. That was 3 years ago. He never mentioned it again. In the meantime, my brother's finding himself continued on what I later understood was a partially subsidized basis. He was living in a studio across town that he claimed he was covering with freelance work. I did not dig into the details because I told myself I trusted my parents to manage their own spending. I had given them a foundation. What they built on it was their choice. That was my first mistake. In finance, we call it insufficient due diligence. The Seattle conference was not optional. It was the kind of event where the right conversation in the right hallway could determine the next 3 years of your career. I had been invited to present a paper alongside 2 partners at my firm. My flight left on a Monday morning. My cat, whose name is Bureau because I named him during a very long tax season, is elderly and requires medication twice a day in his food. He is not difficult, but he requires someone to show up. My parents were the obvious choice. They were 40 minutes away, retired, and in possession of a car and a key to my building that I had given them the previous Christmas when my father had a brief health scare and I wanted them to be able to reach me quickly. The request was so small that I almost felt embarrassed asking. 5 days. Morning and evening check-in. I had pre-portioned the medication into labeled bags. I had written instructions that covered every conceivable situation. I had even pre-ordered their favorite deli items to be delivered to their apartment as a thank you. My mother's response was to laugh and use the word staff. I sat at my kitchen table after hanging up and looked at the wall for a while. Bureau climbed into my lap and pushed his head against my hand, and I scratched behind his ears and thought about leverage. In negotiation, which is most of what I do for a living, leverage is simply the honest accounting of what each party stands to lose. The mistake most people make is believing that leverage only exists in formal agreements. It does not. It exists in every relationship where one party has provided something the other party has come to expect. The moment you stop providing it, the expectation becomes visible, and expectations, when they are suddenly unfulfilled, will tell you everything about what someone actually thought they were entitled to. My parents had come to expect a life that their own finances could not support. That expectation had apparently grown so solid that asking them to check on a cat felt, to my mother, like an unreasonable imposition. I wanted to understand exactly how solid it had grown. I opened the expense tracking spreadsheet I had set up 3 years ago, the one I checked quarterly to make sure the budget I had built for them was holding. I had not looked at it in 6 months. I pulled the last 12 bank statements on the account I funded. I almost missed it at first because the transfer was coded under a category I had labeled Family Support Miscellaneous, $700 a month, consistent, going out to an account I did not recognize. I pulled the account number and ran it through the tools I have access to, through my firm. It was my brother's account. $700 a month for 14 months, $9,800, coming from the budget I had created for my parents' basic needs, going directly to a person who had told me, the last time we spoke, that his freelance consulting business was really gaining traction. I closed the spreadsheet. I opened a new one. I labeled it, The Actual Situation. I did not sleep much that night. I went through everything. I pulled 3 years of statements, every account I had touched, every autopay I had set up. By 2 in the morning, I had a complete picture. And the picture was this. My parents had been quietly diverting money to my brother since approximately 8 months after I set up their financial arrangement. The amount had started small, 200 here, 100 there, and had grown steadily into a fixed monthly transfer as my brother's various ventures continued to fail to generate income. They had never told me. Not once. In 3 years of monthly calls, in every conversation where my father said things were fine, and my mother described their routine, the morning walks, the book sale at the library, to the new restaurant they tried on their anniversary, they had never mentioned that they were sending a third of their monthly budget to my brother. My brother, who I later confirmed, had not paid his own rent once in over a year. I thought about the word staff. I thought about how easily it had come out of her mouth. I called my firm's travel coordinator and booked a professional pet care service for the week, the kind that sends licensed, bonded caretakers with verifiable references. The cost was significant. I paid it without hesitation. Then I called my attorney. I need to review the lease structure on the apartment, I said. And I want to discuss what options I have if a tenant has been using designated funds for an undisclosed third-party transfer. She was quiet for a moment. How long has this been happening? 14 months that I can confirm, I said. Possibly longer. Send me the statements, she said. We'll talk Thursday. I did not call my parents. I did not text. I let Monday come, boarded my flight, and spent 5 days in Seattle being excellent at my job. The conference went better than I had planned. 2 of the partners told me directly that my presentation was the strongest of the week. On Thursday evening, sitting in my hotel room with room service and a view of the water, I got a text from my mother asking if I had received her voicemail about a furniture sale at the place near their building. I had not listened to the voicemail. I did not respond to the text. On Friday afternoon, my attorney called. The lease I had signed gave me significant discretion as the account holder and lease signatory. The undisclosed transfers were not technically illegal because the account was in my parents' names and the money had been designated as for their use. However, my attorney pointed out that I had drafted the original arrangement with language specifying that the funds were for essential living expenses, rent, utilities, food, medical. A recurring transfer to a third party's personal account did not fall within that language. You have options, she said. You can renegotiate, you can restructure, or you can close the arrangement entirely. The lease is up for renewal in 60 days. Let's not renew, I said. When I came home from Seattle, I gave myself 1 week. I needed to think clearly, without anger making the decisions. I am not good at anger. I never have been. What I am good at is patience and precision, which in this situation amounted to the same thing. I made appointments. I drafted documents. I made one difficult phone call to a property management company about a different 2-bedroom unit in a less expensive building, one that my parents could actually afford on their pension alone, without any supplemental support from me. Then I called my parents and told them I would be coming by on Saturday morning. I said I had some things to discuss. My mother said that sounded serious and laughed a little, which told me she had no idea what was coming. My father met me at the door. He looked glad to see me, genuinely glad, not the performed gladness of someone who knows they are in trouble. That was when I understood that he had convinced himself there was nothing wrong, that the transfers to my brother were just a small family accommodation, something I would understand and accept if it ever came up, which it would not, because they had no intention of ever bringing it up. My mother was in the kitchen. The apartment was neat, warm, smelling like the coffee they drank every morning. Bureau's medications were untouched on the counter. They had never gone to use them, and for a moment, I had to look away. I sat down at the dining table. I had brought a folder. I set it between us without opening it. Before I say anything, I said, I want to ask you one question, and I want you to think about it honestly before you answer. My father nodded. My mother set down her coffee. In the last 14 months, I said, has any money from the account I fund gone to my brother? The silence that followed had a texture to it. I have been in enough negotiations to recognize the specific quality of silence that happens when someone is calculating rather than considering. My father looked at the table. My mother looked at my father. We were going to tell you, my father said. When? I asked. He did not answer. I opened the folder. I had printed 3 documents and placed them in order. The first was the statement summary, 14 months of transfers, totaling $9,800, highlighted in yellow. I slid it across the table. My mother looked at it. It wasn't that much, she said, which was the wrong thing to say, and I think she knew it immediately after she said it. It was exactly that much, I said. I counted. My father started to speak something about how my brother was struggling, how the freelance work hadn't come together, how they were just trying to help him get stable. I let him finish. I had heard versions of this speech my entire life, and I understood now that I would always hear it, in some form, for as long as I continued to make it possible. I know he's struggling, I said, when my father was done. He has been struggling, in one form or another, for 8 years. And every time, someone has stepped in to soften the landing. First you, and then me. And somehow it has never once resulted in him landing. My mother's chin came up. You don't understand what it's like for him. He's not like you. No, I said, he's not. But that's not the issue. The issue is that you made a financial decision involving money I provided, for a purpose I specified, and you did it without telling me, for over a year. You would have said no, my mother said. Yes, I said. I would have. She looked at me like that was unreasonable. Like me saying no to secretly funding my adult brother's life through a budget I set up for their basic needs was an eccentricity she had learned to work around. I slid the second document across the table. It was the lease renewal notice, with a handwritten note from my attorney indicating that I would not be exercising the renewal option. I am not renewing the lease, I said. You have 60 days. I've already identified 2 apartments in your price range based on your pension income alone. I'll send you the listings this weekend. My father's face went pale. Grace, he started, and then stopped, because I had not told them my name was Grace in this story, but the word was already out, some reflex of his own panic, filling in a placeholder for whatever he meant to say. You have a pension, I said. You have Social Security. You have no rent right now because I've been paying it, which means you have had 3 years to save. I would like you to tell me honestly, have you saved anything? Another silence. Shorter this time. We had some unexpected expenses, my mother said. $700 a month to my brother, I said, for 14 months. The third document was the new agreement my attorney had drafted. It was short, 2 pages. It outlined what I would and would not continue to provide. I would pay for any genuine medical emergency, directly to the provider, not through a shared account. I would not be funding any ongoing living expenses. The account I had been maintaining would be closed at the end of the month. My father picked up the document. His hands were steady, but his jaw was tight. He read it slowly, the way people read things they are hoping will say something different than they expect. This is everything, he said quietly. You're taking everything. I'm stopping something I started, I said. There's a difference. My mother stood up. She was not crying, she was past crying, and into something harder, more brittle. You come in here with your folders and your lawyers, and you think that makes you right. We are your parents. We raised you. We did everything for you. I thought about the car I bought with my first paycheck. I thought about the scholarship applications I had filled out alone at the kitchen table while my brother's college fund grew. I thought about the diner and my father's folder, and the word miracle. I thought about Bureau's medications sitting untouched on their counter. You did many things for me, I said, and I am grateful for them. And separately and completely unrelated to that gratitude, I will no longer be subsidizing choices you make without my knowledge. Those are 2 separate things. I have kept them separate for 3 years. I am still keeping them separate now. My mother opened her mouth to respond, and that was when we heard the front door. My brother had a key. He walked in the way he always did, like he had arrived at a party that was being thrown in his honor. He was wearing the jacket I had seen in a photo on his social media 2 weeks earlier, the one that cost more than Bureau's monthly medication. He stopped when he saw me. His expression cycled through several things in quick succession. What's going on? He said. Sit down, my father said, which was the most decisive thing I had heard him say in years. My brother did not sit. He looked at the folder on the table. He looked at me. Did you tell her? He said to my parents, and the way he said it, the slight edge of accusation told me that he had known all along. He had not been a passive recipient. He had asked. He had expected. He had, perhaps even encouraged. I found it, I said. They didn't tell me. I found it the same way I find everything I looked at the numbers. He turned his full attention to me then, and I watched him decide what kind of person to be in this moment. He tried for reasonable first. Look, I was going to pay it back. I'm in the middle of a project right now, a real one, and in 3 months. Stop, I said. I was not angry. I want to be clear about that, because I think he expected anger and had prepared for it. What he got instead was something he had no script for. I'm not here to negotiate with you. This conversation is not about you. It is about a decision my parents made. You are welcome to stay and listen, or you are welcome to leave. But I'm not going to debate with you about a project that will resolve itself in 3 months, because I have heard that sentence approximately 9 times in 8 years, and the project never resolves. His jaw tightened. You've always done this, he said. You've always acted like you're better than us. Like because you make money, you get to control everyone. I don't control anyone, I said. I pay for things, and I'm stopping. Because Mom didn't want to watch your cat, he said, and laughed the same short, sharp laugh my mother had used on the phone. It ran in the family, apparently. Because Mom called me staff, I said. In an apartment I lease, while spending money I provide, and because it made me look at the numbers, and the numbers told a story no one was planning to tell me. He looked at my parents. They looked at the table. So what, you're just cutting them off, he said. They're your parents. They're getting older. What happens when? They have a pension, I said. They have Social Security. They have no outstanding debt. In 2 months, they will have an apartment they can afford on their own income, in a neighborhood with a grocery store and a bus line. They will be fine. More importantly, they will be living within a budget that belongs to them, not to me, which means the decisions they make with it will finally be genuinely theirs. He stared at me. And me? He said. You, I said, are 28 years old. You have a college education, even if incomplete. You have skills, even if currently monetized inconsistently. You are healthy. You have more advantages than most people in this country start with. What happens to you is entirely up to you, which is exactly how it should have been for the past 8 years. I could take you to court, he said, which was such a transparent bluff that I almost felt sorry for him. For what? I asked. Stopping voluntary financial support I was never legally obligated to provide? Please do. I have an attorney on retainer and 14 months of documented transfers showing exactly where my money went. I would genuinely enjoy that conversation in front of a judge. He left. Not dramatically, there was no door slamming, no final pronouncement. He just picked up his jacket and walked out, which was in its own way more honest than any exit speech he might have made. My parents signed the new agreement 20 minutes later. My father's signature was steady. My mother signed without reading it, which told me she had understood, somewhere in the middle of the conversation, that the time for negotiation was over. I drove home in the quiet of late morning, the city moving around me in its usual indifferent Saturday rhythm, and I thought about Bureau waiting for me with his creaky joints and his twice-daily medication, and his absolute uncomplicated faith that I would come home. The next several weeks were not peaceful. Exactly. My mother sent emails. Long ones, then short ones, then no subject lines at all. Just walls of text that blended hurt and accusation in proportions that shifted daily. My father called twice and said very little. I answered both calls, listened, and said I understood. I did not apologize, because I had nothing to apologize for. I did not explain further, because I had already said everything that needed to be said. My brother posted something on social media about how some families will abandon you the moment you need them most. 3 of his friends liked it. I did not respond. I added him to a folder I keep for things that require no action. What surprised me, and I will be honest about this because I think it is important, was how much of the weight I had not known I was carrying. It was only when I stopped carrying it that I could feel the shape of where it had been. I had managed my parents' financial situation for 3 years, the way I managed a client portfolio with discipline and consistency, and a kind of professional remove that had kept me from asking whether the arrangement was actually good for anyone involved. I had been so focused on preventing collapse that I had never asked whether the structure I was preventing the collapse of was worth preserving. It was not. It had been a structure built on my labor and sustained by their avoidance of reality, and the kindest thing I could have done for them, for my brother, possibly even for myself, would have been to let it find its natural level years earlier. 6 weeks after the meeting at their apartment, my father called on a Sunday morning. I was making coffee. Bureau was on the counter watching the birds at the window feeder, which he did every morning with an intensity that suggested he had not yet processed the concept of glass. My father did not lead with an apology. He led with a question. "Are you okay?" he said. "I mean, really. I've been thinking about it, and I never asked you that. Not once in 3 years. Not before I handed you that folder at the diner. I handed you the folder and let you fix it, and I never once asked if you were okay." I sat down. "I'm okay," I said. "I wasn't a good father to you," he said. "Not the way I should have been. I let your mother and I let your brother. I let it happen for a long time. I know that." I looked at Bureau on the counter. He flicked his tail at a sparrow. I know you do, I said. I'm not asking you to, I don't need anything from you, he said quickly, as if he was afraid I would hang up. I just wanted to say it, that's all. We talked for 20 minutes. He told me about the new apartment, smaller, he said, but good light, a courtyard with a bench. My mother was adjusting, which I understood to mean she was unhappy but managing. He said they had found a grocery store 2 blocks away, and he had started cooking again, which he used to love and had stopped somewhere along the way. I did not offer anything. I did not take anything back. But when we hung up, I sat for a while at my kitchen table, coffee getting cold, listening to Bureau's commentary on the birds, and I thought that the word that described what I felt was not victory, and it was not forgiveness. It was something quieter than both of those. It was just the particular relief of a problem that had finally been allowed to be exactly the size it actually was. My brother eventually got a job. I heard it from my father, indirectly something in facilities management, stable hours, health insurance. I did not ask for details. I do not need them. I genuinely hope he is well. I also genuinely understand that my hoping for it and my funding it are not the same thing and do not need to be. I got the promotion that Seattle was about. My name is on the door of an office on the 14th floor now, which Bureau finds less interesting than the birds at the window, but which I find, on most mornings, quietly extraordinary. I still have Bureau's medications sorted into labeled bags, one for each week, lined up on the shelf above his food. It takes me 4 minutes every Sunday evening. There is no one else who needs to know about them. There is no one else whose schedule I am working around. There is a particular kind of freedom in that, and I had not understood what it felt like until I stopped making everything complicated enough to require a second person's approval. Some foundations, it turns out, are not worth keeping solid. Some weight, when you finally set it down, is just weight.